Talking Films. This is a podcast by DokuFest. Tune in to discover more about documentary film and filmmakers. I'm Aleksandra, your host. Welcome to another episode of Talking Films, and welcome to my guest today, Sanjin. Would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners and viewers?
How much time do we have? No. My name is Sanjin Pejković. I'm a film scholar, film critic, cultural journalist. I work as a film commissioner in Sweden. And so, for the last 20, 25 years, I've been working with different things, but always in connection to film. So I've been working with films and film industry in different ways.
We'll come back to that just after the first question that we ask all our guests. How was your trip to Prizren?
So this time I took a bus from Belgrade to Prizren, which was pretty convenient actually. Took a night bus. So I arrived like 5:45, 6 in the morning. So that was the tricky part, coming from the bus station to the hotel that early. But everything went well. Sometimes I come by plane from Sweden. Sometimes I travel in the region, and then it's various different ways of coming here. Sometimes it was a nightmare trip between Sarajevo and Prizren. So I mean, these areas are fairly small. Like if we're thinking like kilometer-wise, geographically, but it takes a lot of effort sometimes to come here. But this time, everything went well.
We're very happy that you made it here without too much of a hassle. You said you cooperate with film festivals. You're also here at DokuFest. So what does that mean? How does that cooperation look like?
So here in DokuFest, sometimes I'm part of the pre-selection committee. So I'm very privileged in that sense that I get to see a lot of films. Some of them I recommend, some of them I write that I might not think that they would fit for this festival. It's not always necessary. I mean, it's not always like that the films are bad. It's not about that, but you have to also think about the festival's profile, the different topics that are being raised at certain festivals. So that's one part of my job here, to go through a lot of films, which I do gladly. I cooperate with other festivals like in Scandinavia as well, and then it might be something else like moderating conversations, giving lectures, talking on some panels, but also choosing some of the films, because sometimes I get the opportunities to travel to other film festivals, and then it's always good to see something that might be interesting for certain festivals. Yeah.
That sounds very exciting. Very nice to hear about your work. Yeah. So when you're not at film festivals, you do research. And you told me yesterday, and I researched a bit on the internet, that you're specialized in film cultures of countries of the former Yugoslavia. Why is that interesting?
Well, I suppose it's interesting from many different perspectives, for many different reasons. I have my private alibi for doing this. Like I come from I was born and raised in former Yugoslavia, in Bosnia, Herzegovina, and then we fled the country during the war. In '94, we arrived to Sweden. So I've been living in Sweden for 30 years, but still, this was my way of maybe dealing with, also privately, but also professionally, to try to deal with some questions that arose after all the wars and everything that happened, like what really happened. So in a way, films and moving images, audiovisual history of the country might be interesting in that case to see what we can analyze and what we can grasp from those images. So that might be one of the main reasons why I deal with it. But yeah, so my PhD was about post-Yugoslav films and the remembrance of the former Yugoslavia in post-Yugoslav films. I was interested in how mediated memories, how we mediate memories, like how do we translate collective memories in the film form. So what can post-Yugoslav films tell us about former Yugoslavia? So that was my main question, and I tried to see what the answers might be.
Before we go deeper into the post-Yugoslav film scene, I would maybe like to ask you how the Yugoslav film landscape looked like.
I will give you just a brief answer to that because it's a very complicated topic, of course. But one could say that it was a very creative film scene between 45 and 91. Of course, with a lot of ideological frameworking of on the themes and on the themes and topics that were being shot, but at the same time you had large creativity apart from those ideologically based films. So of course you had films that would relate to the Second World War, to the partisan struggle, to the communism, to the party, to Tito. But at the same time, you had a vast number of films that were also melodramas, mainstream films, love stories, comedies. So it was a very diverse and broad film industry in that sense that there were so many different topics that were being highlighted, and a lot of films were not political in that way. Very many films were artistically very interesting, with introduction of like film modernism in the early 60s. You can see great films that were being made that didn't necessarily relate to the political situation in the country, but were still controversial, maybe because of some gender issues, other issues that might provoke a reaction from party, at some point.
I read that in music, for example, artists enjoyed a fair amount of freedom, even for songs that sometimes even criticized, like certain political developments. How was it in film? Was it also more freedom than maybe in other communist or totalitarian regimes? Or what's your impression?
Well, it was. I would not say that it's comparable to other Eastern European countries in that sense. It depends, if you're comparing 60s and the 70s, you can see that certain political turmoils even spread to the film world. So things that occurred in Yugoslavia in 71 with uprisings of different nationalisms led to certain self-censorship regarding some subjects. I mean, this is very generalized, of course, but I would say, of course, films were censored, and but not that many. But maybe one censored film is one too many, But at the same time, you have to take in account how the political situation looked like. So it would depend, on different aspects of it. Like if it's a more like liberal time at that point, like let's say mid 60s, you could raise some highly controversial topics and make film about that, but 10 years later it wouldn't be possible. But then 10 years after that, in the mid 80s, it would be again possible to raise some controversial topics again.
Yeah. So in the 90s, Yugoslavia broke apart very violently. What did that mean for the cultural and the film landscape?
So I mean, film can be a very useful tool also in creating new nationalist discourses, and new paradigms. So in a way, you could see that film was used also in order to establish new national cinemas, So you can see that, but at the same time, you have also. Pretty early in the 90s, you can see that co-productions and like the cultural exchange I mean, of course, was bothered by the wars. It would be crazy if it wasn't. But you would still see, like in the end of the 90s, you have some Serbian films coming to Croatia, films, and people are traveling in the area. So this, this way of cultural dialogue still never really disappeared from the region. In that sense, like everything would just stop, you know. And because of the economic aspects of film, it's really it's really expensive to make films. You know, it's a collective work. So in order to raise fundings, you need to maybe operate towards different publics. So in that case, some Serbian directors might use, some post-production means in Croatia, vice versa. You could use a Croatian actor in a Bosnian film in order to apply for European money and stuff like that. So you could still see, and you can still see that today, of course, with all the old co-productions that are still happening in the region, that in some sense, this idea of let's say, post-Yugoslav space really never vanished. And we can see that some of the nationally framed films, like in Serbia, are doing well in Croatia, in Slovenia. Some Bosnian films travel a lot through different markets in the region. So it's really hard to say. I mean, of course, then we have nationalist films that were being made in the 90s, definitely. And you have the whole judicial frameworking of what a national cinema is. You have like film critics tried to establish early like national cinemas afterwards, like let's see if this can qualify as a purely Croatian films since 50s or 60s, or is this history of Serbian cinema throughout 20th century, even though it was under Yugoslavia. So you can see also that part of history reframing or history revisionism occurring in the whole of the region.
Yeah, that's maybe more problematic part or negative aspect. As a more positive one or fascinating one for me is that also during the very war, like during the siege of Sarajevo, for example, people made movies, screened movies, they created even a film festival. Maybe some people wonder, like, if you're shelled, why do you need art? Why do you need movies? What would be your answer?
Yeah, well, that's maybe that you need art and culture and movies, like at most when these times occur, you know. So, me personally, I remember this period very well. Growing up in Bosnia during the war, I mean, it was essential to watch MTV every time you had electricity. For me, it was like because it gave us a sense of being like we felt that we were still part of the world, you know, that we were not completely cut off. And being a young person, teenager in your early 20s or 30s, culture is very, I mean, it plays a huge part in our lives. So establishing Sarajevo Film Festival was amazing and truly important humanistic idea about how we still can be part of the global cultural movement, you know.
Yeah. So after the war, there kind of emerged a new genre, almost like a dealing with the past movie genre. What's your take on this? Can you explain us this development?
I would say it's not something that it's not it is like it would be it's very natural to try to comprehend what had happened. And in order to understand not only the past, but also in order to try to avoid some of the mistakes for the future, but also to try just to resonate with yourself and your possible audiences about can we engage in a critical dialogue about ourselves. That's how I view dealing with the past. Then you have some other aspects of that which are, I mean, so important as well. You can see that digitization has brought us, like we can go back much easily into the archives and see how, how these films relate to our everyday life today, you know. Then you can dig up some of the films, like films from Srebrenica that were shot by Scorpions, like Scorpione, the group, paramilitary group that captured on film how they shot civilians, young people around Srebrenica, you know. Then you can use that material as a proof of the genocide, you know. So it has different meanings, it only depends on what your perspective is, you know. But I would say that collectively, and this is of course a huge generalization, I think collectively we still need to look for answers. We might not find them, but I think that we're gonna continue looking for some answers for long time to come. Because if you watch Americans are still making films about both Vietnam and Second World War and First World War. We are still making historic spectacles. We are making films about historical events in different genres, in documentary and fiction form and stuff like that. So we still need to resonate with our past, you know, collectively and individually.
Is it also a danger that maybe from the outside perspective, like outside the Balkans, people might perceive the cinema from here as only war-related? Would that be a misconception also?
Well, yeah, and we have to go into the economic aspects of film production. You know, in a country like Bosnia and Herzegovina, where you make 1 or 2 films yearly, it's really hard not to. It's hard to avoid these topics that are still so important I would say in everyday life of people. You know, we still relate to the wars in the 90s. So if you don't have the economical means, that would be so hard to try to have a diverse film production. So in that sense, I would agree with you that it might be problematic. But also, this is a very problematic part of film festivals' policies as well. You know, so.
How do you mean?
Well, you know.
They expect it, like they expect the Balkans to deliver, like bluntly said, violence.
There is
as a prejudice, also, of course.
There is some expectation of self-exotification. You know, so when we watch new wave of Romanian cinema, you know. They're being rightly hailed as like very groundbreaking films. They are so important artistically in every aspect, you know, and they are amazing. I love them. But you see those films on the festivals, and you might think that this is the only thing that is being produced in Romania. But of course not. We have mainstream films, we have comedies, we have series, we have a lot of other different genres. But for us, where we live now, whatever, for me in Sweden, I get to see through festivals maybe 1 to 2 films from Romania every year. And of course, my image of Romania would be that, well, they only produce bleak films about everyday life in Romania, still trying to figure out what had happened after fall of Ceausescu, you know. So I'm exaggerating a bit, but at the same time, that is...
See now where
So if there are certain expectations at European and other world film festivals about productions coming from Balkan areas, then we might, you know, film producers and filmmakers, they go where the money is, they want to work, you know. So as I said, it might be an exaggeration and a generalization, but I would still say that it's not only about what Balkan filmmakers would like to make, but it's also about different markets and pitching forums around the world, you know.
Yeah.
But we are lucky that we have, in a way that digital image and digitized film has democratized the whole market in a way, you know. So a lot of documentaries are being produced that are very creative, heterogenic, different in forms and styles. So you can still grasp some nuances in all of that, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah.
You're based in Sweden.
Yeah.
I'm based in Switzerland. I don't know how it is in Sweden, but in Switzerland, it's very rare that movies from the Balkans actually make it to cinemas. And for me, it's surprising because we have such a huge diaspora from many Balkan countries. I would somehow expect for these thousands of people, of like potential viewers, that there would be an offer also in the cinema that they could maybe relate in a different way than to, I don't know, action movies from the US. So I wonder, why are there so seemingly few movies who make it out of the region to like the mainstream places to watch them?
Well, it has to do with distribution structures, depends on who's owning movie theaters as well. I've seen some changes in that for the last 2-3 years. It might be a post-pandemic, that it's related to post-pandemic issues of film theaters, because we see that the audiences are not coming back still. Largely, like they are coming back, but we still miss audiences. So I've seen that some Serbian distributors distributed some huge Serbian mainstream films on their own, you know, through movie theaters. So they just rented a theater for a while, and then they screened Serbian films, you know, in order to gather diaspora audiences. So it might be, you know, there are many solutions to that, but we'll see. I mean, yeah, I would also guess that a lot of people would be interested in going to cinemas to watch like films from their own home countries. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious how it will go on. Yesterday we met outside of Doku Cafe after screening, and you mentioned that you work with young people in kind of an exchange program that has to do with film, but also democracy. Can you tell us what you're doing there with the young people?
Yeah, so this is sadly something that I don't do anymore, but this is one of the main reasons why I've been to DokuFest like 10, 15 times, I don't remember. I've skipped few years here and there, but I think I started coming in 2009 or 2010. We got sponsored by Swedish Institute, and one of their projects was called Creative Force, where we gathered Swedish youth and Swedish filmmakers in order to travel around Balkans, like in North Macedonia, Serbia, Kosovo, and Bosnia and Herzegovina, in order for young people to meet and to try to make films on different topics of human rights and stuff like that. So this was going on between 2009 and 2015, if I recall it right. And it was something that gave me a lot of hope. And it was something that it was one of the best things that we ever did, because it was not about filmmaking. Of course it was. It was nice to make films, but that wasn't the most important thing in that project. The most important thing was to get young people to travel in the area here and to meet each other. So we were as happiest when we were just invisible, you know, when they would not care about us at all, when they would talk to each other, when they would make films, but also go out and, you know, talk and just be with each other. So that was interesting to bring people from Serbia here, people from Kosovo to Serbia, you know. So it was just something that was very, very like a creative chaos, really. But it was something that I would gladly do again. But sadly, I mean, it ended. Yeah, so that was how I met all the crew at the DokuFest because we heard about this amazing festival in Kosovo. I didn't know anything about DokuFest back then, but then we traveled around because we wanted to meet potential new partners. So we traveled to different festivals, and like the moment I met Veton, it just felt perfect in that sense that this is gonna work, and it did for quite some time.
What is the hope exactly that you mentioned before? Like you mentioned that this exchange with the young people, like being there, it gave you hope. What was it exactly that gave you hope, or how does that hope look like?
I mean, you have to be realistic about the optics of nationalism in these areas, all of these countries here, and different reframing of historiography here, You have schools in Bosnia where kids are separated. So
Two schools under one roof system. Yeah.
So they basically learn different histories about each other, but they live
next door
to each other, So in order to get to know your neighbor, you need to meet him and her or them. So you need to meet people that you are supposed to, I don't know, feel hostile about. And these young people showed us it was very simple, Just bring the kids from Serbia here and from Kosovo to Bosnia and So it was just so simple to see that after half an hour they would communicate in a very freely and openly mode, So it was just at the same time we spoke about nationalisms, we spoke about the past, dealing with the past, and it wasn't like, yeah, let's all agree in our great we are so much better than the rest of the population here because we are so open-minded. It wasn't like that. They could argue about the past. They could argue about their views on what some historical reference, So it was not that we would just hug and love each other. It's not about that. But they could understand that other people might have different perspectives on what they thought was the truth, So that gave me hope. I mean, it's okay to argue. It's okay to not to problematize the past in that sense. But at the same time, also, it's important to keep in mind that we might have a dialogue about this. It's not just one-way monologue about the past.
Yeah. So maybe to stay with the theme of hope and maybe look a bit into the future, how do you think films can change the world for better? Maybe that's naive, but I don't know, can films make the future better?
Well, yeah.
In the Balkans especially.
Yeah. When I really can only talk from my perspective, but when I feel like that films can change something inside me, those are the times when they are provoking me, when they are asking questions but not give me any answers. So if you have plenty of films that might ask difficult and problematic questions and raise some issues that might be controversial, that might be a good start for us to go inside ourselves in order to make an important introspection about what we do think about certain topics, So that might be an answer for how films can change the world. We have to start with ourselves, So we have to be open so we can raise these questions. Otherwise, we know all the answers, so we don't need to improve anything,
And now, as a last question to your personal future, what's your next project?
Well, actually, it is like that I'm for some time I've been working as a film commissioner in the region of Västra Götaland, as the western part of Sweden. But I'm longing back to academia. I would love to do a research on gastarbeiters and film, to open up some archives in Sweden where gastarbeiters made their own films. So outside the film system of the Swedish Film Institute, I know for a fact that a lot of diaspora groups filmed themselves, made films about their own communities, and I would really love to do some research on that. Also to highlight the importance of gastarbeiters that traveled throughout Europe and really were essential for building up Europe after the Second World War. So that I would hope to do sometimes in the near future, and I would love to spend some time with those audiovisual, with that material.
Sounds amazing. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for having me here.
Find all the episodes of our podcast on YouTube. Share the episodes with your friends and make sure to follow DokuFest on social media. Organization of this podcast, Blerina Kanxha and Samir Karahoda. Production, Flutura, Balaj. And I'm your host, Aleksandra Hiltmann.